and do another episode, another chapter, just because we could, and watch them have another experience. That if we were to do it, we needed to really, there needed to be a reason to come back.
For 8 years, one of Hollywood's most explosive breakups played out behind sealed filings, legal battles, and carefully controlled public statements. When Angelina Jolie filed for divorce in 2016, few expected the dispute to stretch nearly a decade or become one of the most closely watched celebrity legal wars in recent memory. What followed was a long, drawn-out conflict filled with court filings, shifting narratives, and disputes that never fully stayed out of the headlines. So what really happened during those 8 years? And why is Jolie's side of the story only becoming clearer now that the case has finally reached its end? Join us as we uncover the full truth behind one of Hollywood's most complicated divorces. The relationship that the world wanted to believe in. Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie met in 2004 on the set of the action film Mr. and Mrs. Smith, in which they played a married couple who were secretly both assassins hired to kill each other. The irony of that premise has not been lost on anyone who has followed the story of what their real relationship became. At the time they met, Brad Pitt was still married to Jennifer Aniston. Jolie, on the other hand, was a single mother who had adopted her son Maddox from Cambodia in 2002. The relationship that developed between them during production became one of the most discussed in the entertainment press for years, partly because of the circumstances under which it began, and partly because of the extraordinary public visibility both of them carried. Brad and Aniston announced their separation in January 2005. Brad and Jolie became public about their relationship later that year. They went on to adopt 2 more children, Zahara from Ethiopia in 2005 and Pax from Vietnam in 2007, and had 3 biological children together, Shiloh in 2006 and twins Knox and Vivian in 2008. They were engaged in April 2012 and married in a private ceremony at Chateau Miraval, their French estate, on August 23, 2014, with their children present as part of the wedding party. They were, for a substantial period of time, the most recognizable couple on the planet, and the family they had built together, 6 children across multiple countries, cultures, and biological connections, represented something that the public found genuinely moving. The word Brangelina entered the cultural vocabulary and stayed there. They made films together and separately, traveled the world, engaged in humanitarian work, gave interviews that were warm and specific, and seemed to confirm that what the cameras had captured when they were together was real rather than managed. The general public's understanding of their relationship was one of a genuine and powerful connection between 2 of the most extraordinary people in the entertainment world. What Angelina Jolie filed for in September 2016, citing irreconcilable differences, was the end of that understanding. She filed on September 19, 2016, just days after an incident on a private plane that would define the legal battle for the following 8 years. She requested sole physical custody of all 6 children, with visitation for Brad Pitt. She did not make a public statement explaining her reasons at the time of the filing. She did not have to. The filing itself was the statement. 2 years of marriage, 12 years together, 6 children, and a family that millions of people had watched being built. And she was done. The question of what had happened was one that the public could not stop asking. The answer came slowly, over years, through court documents, legal filings, and the specific, carefully chosen moments when Jolie decided to say what she knew. So what actually happened on that private plane in September 2016? And why did it become the axis around which everything turned? The plane incident. The incident that led to Jolie's divorce filing took place on a private plane on September 14, 2016, during a flight from France to Los Angeles. The Jolie-Brad family was on board. What happened during that flight has been the subject of sustained legal dispute, FBI investigation, and years of conflicting accounts. What has been established through the various legal proceedings is disturbing enough that it reframes the entire question of why the divorce took 8 years to finalize, rather than the question of why she filed. Reports at the time stated that Brad Pitt became drunk on the flight, and that a physical altercation occurred involving Jolie and at least some of their children. The FBI opened an investigation into the incident in connection with potential child endangerment charges. The investigation was eventually closed without charges being filed against Brad Pitt. The Brad Pitt camp has consistently denied the characterization of what happened on the flight, and Brad has not been criminally charged in connection with it. What Jolie's legal filings have stated, across multiple court documents filed over the years of the divorce and winery proceedings, is that she filed for divorce days after what her filings describe as a physical altercation on the plane that involved Brad being physically abusive to her and at least 2 of their children. Her legal filings demanded that Brad hand over third-party communications relating to the plane incident as part of the winery litigation, arguing that the pattern of behavior on the plane was connected to the broader pattern she was documenting in the divorce proceedings. The demand was part of a legal strategy that used the winery lawsuit as a vehicle for making the plane incident part of the discoverable record. The significance of the plane in the legal history of this case cannot be overstated. The divorce filing came 5 days after the flight. The custody battle that followed the divorce filing was driven entirely by Jolie's claims about what happened on that plane and what it said about the safety of the children in Brad's unsupervised care. The winery litigation, which began in 2022 and continued through 2025, became a secondary arena in which both sides were effectively fighting the same war from a different angle. Jolie's legal team consistently framed her actions in the context of the winery sale and the plane incident and its aftermath. Brad's team consistently framed the winery dispute as a financial betrayal unconnected to personal history. The result of all of this was that the divorce, which should have been a relatively straightforward legal process for 2 people with significant resources and capable legal representation, became one of the most prolonged and contentious celebrity legal battles in recent memory. 8 years of legal war. The divorce proceedings that began in 2016 were formally bifurcated in 2019, meaning the legal status of the marriage was separated from the unresolved issues of custody and property. The bifurcation allowed both parties to be declared legally single, while the other issues remained active in court. It was a procedural step that signaled how far things had traveled from the possibility of a clean and final resolution in any reasonable time frame. The custody battle was the most painful and most private dimension of the proceedings. Jolie had sought sole physical custody of all 6 children. The court proceedings around custody involved testimony from the children themselves, assessments by family therapists, and a series of rulings that evolved over time. A private judge, John Ouderkirk, was involved in the proceedings and issued rulings that Jolie subsequently challenged on the grounds that he had not disclosed prior professional relationships with Brad's legal team. In May 2021, an appeals court removed Ouderkirk from the case on those grounds, which invalidated the custody determination he had issued and sent that aspect of the proceedings back to the beginning. The judge's removal was a significant legal victory for Jolie, but also a demonstration of how completely the proceedings had broken down into something that served neither party well. 8 years of legal dispute over a marriage that had lasted 2 years formally and 12 years informally. involving 6 children whose lives were being shaped by every development in the proceedings. As the children grew older, several of them made public statements that shed light on the family situation in ways neither parent could control. Maddox, the eldest, appeared to have a strained or non-existent relationship with Brad by the time he was a young adult. Zahara dropped the Brad surname and went by Zahara Jolie when she joined the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority at Spelman College in 2023, a decision that attracted significant press attention and was widely interpreted as a statement about her relationship with her father. Shiloh filed legal paperwork to remove the Brad surname from her name on her 18th birthday in 2024, a development that Brad's team addressed publicly with visible pain. Jolie, in court documents and public statements, repeatedly described Brad as conducting a vindictive war against her since she filed for divorce. Her legal filings characterized his actions in the winery litigation and in the custody proceedings as part of a problematic pattern that she argued was designed to punish her for filing rather than to genuinely serve the children's interests or protect any legitimate business interest. Brad's team consistently rejected this characterization. And then there was the winery. Because the divorce proceedings themselves, as bitter as they were, eventually reached a conclusion. The winery battle had a life of its own that continued beyond the marriage settlement and became the arena in which Jolie most directly said what she believed had happened and why. Chateau Miraval and the sale that started a separate war. Chateau Miraval is a French estate in Provence that Jolie and Brad purchased together in 2011 for $60 million. It is where they got married in 2014. It produces wine that has become genuinely commercially successful under the Miraval label, with some bottles selling out within minutes of release. It was, for the years when they were together, the physical embodiment of the life they had built, the place in the world that was most completely theirs. After the 2016 divorce filing, the estate remained in legal limbo because both parties retained ownership through the holding company structure. In 2021, Jolie sold her 50% stake in the winery to Tenute del Mondo, the wine division of the Stoli Group, for approximately $67 million. She did not notify Brad before making the sale. Brad filed a lawsuit against her in February 2022, alleging she had breached an agreement that neither party would sell their share without giving the other a right of first refusal. He sought to have the sale declared null and void, and later filed claims seeking $35 million in damages for alleged harm to the winery's operations. Jolie's countersuit, filed in September 2022, described Brad as waging a vindictive war against her. Her legal filings argued that there was no secret, unwritten, unspoken contract requiring her to obtain his consent before selling. They argued that the sale was a legitimate exercise of her ownership rights, and that Brad's legal actions were motivated by a desire to punish her for leaving rather than by any genuine business interest. In October 2025, new court documents filed by Jolie's attorneys contained something more personal than the legal argument. Jolie stated in those filings that she and her children had never returned to Chateau Miraval since their divorce because of the painful events that had led to the filing. She wrote directly that to have such a sudden break from my home and memories has been hard. She described wanting to buy a property near Brad's home after the divorce to ensure he remained an important part of the children's lives, and that she had not asked him for alimony or any other financial support, with her savings tied up in the winery at the time. The phrase "painful events" is doing a specific amount of work in that sentence. She is not naming the plane incident directly in this filing. She is connecting the winery, where they married, to the same moment that ended their marriage. She is saying, in language careful enough to withstand legal scrutiny, that the reason she cannot go back to the place where the happiest day of her life occurred is the same reason she filed for divorce 5 days after a flight home from France. The winery and the marriage and the ending of it are, in her account, the same story. In November 2024, a judge ruled that Brad's claims against Jolie could proceed to trial, finding that there had been an implied contract and a verbal agreement, and that a written agreement existed regarding shares in the holding company. That ruling was a legal victory for Brad. 1 month later, on December 30th, 2024, both parties reached a settlement. Jolie's lawyer said in a statement that it was just one part of a long, ongoing process that began 8 years ago, and that Angelina was exhausted, but relieved that this part was over. The word exhausted in that statement is worth sitting with. 8 years of proceedings. 6 children growing up into a legal war between their parents. A marriage that lasted 2 years, consuming nearly a decade of legal, financial, and emotional resources to undo. What the settlement resolved? The December 2024 settlement resolved the divorce itself, which had been legally bifurcated since 2019, but had remained connected to the ongoing custody and property disputes. The terms were not made public. Jolie's lawyer confirmed the settlement had been reached and described her client as relieved that one part of the case was over. The specific phrase, "one part was over," rather than "everything was over," was deliberate and accurate. The winery litigation did not end with the divorce settlement. Brad filed a fresh lawsuit seeking $35 million in damages in the period following the December 2024 settlement, maintaining that the harm to the winery's operations from the sale to the Jolie Group justified ongoing damages claims beyond whatever the divorce settlement had resolved. The Jolie Group connection added complexity, given that the group has ties to Russian ownership interests, a detail that Brad's legal team had flagged as relevant to the business harm claims. Jolie's team filed responses in 2025, denying Brad's claims and reiterating her position that the sale had been a legitimate exercise of her ownership rights. The October 2025 court filings that contained her statement about the painful events and her children never returning to the property were part of this ongoing winery litigation rather than the now settled divorce proceedings. The winery battle had become, in effect, the last remaining arena where the dispute between these two people was still active. A source close to Brad told People following the divorce settlement that Jolie's actions around the winery had caused tremendous collateral damage to those in and around the family, including people employed at the estate who had built careers around the Miraval operation. The source described the sale as intended to punish Brad and said those employed at the winery had effectively become collateral damage in the dispute. Jolie's team rejected the framing entirely. The children, meanwhile, were navigating whatever the settlement and its aftermath meant for their family situation. The oldest, Maddox, was 24 by the time of the divorce settlement. Knox and Vivian, the youngest, were 17. All 6 had spent a significant portion of their childhood and adolescent years with their parents' relationship being mediated by lawyers and courts. Whatever the private agreements between their parents produced, the question of what the preceding 8 years had cost them was one that no settlement document could answer. What Jolie has said publicly. Angelina Jolie has not given a comprehensive public interview about the divorce and everything that surrounded it. She has not made the kind of extended public statement that would allow her version of events to be fully documented in her own words, rather than through legal filings and source-attributed reporting. What she has chosen to say, and how she has chosen to say it, reflects someone who has consistently prioritized the legal and tactical dimensions of the situation over the emotional release that a comprehensive public account might have provided. Her statements in court documents are the clearest expression of her perspective on the official record. She described the pain of having a sudden break from her home and memories. She described Brad as waging a vindictive war against her. She described his legal actions as part of a problematic pattern. She stated that she had not asked for alimony or financial support, and that she had been willing to buy a property near Brad's home to keep him present in the children's lives. These are specific and deliberate claims made in legal documents where their accuracy is subject to challenge, and the consequences of misrepresentation are significant. Her public appearances during the 8 years of the divorce proceedings told their own story. The Maria biopic, in which she played the opera singer Maria Callas in her final years in Paris, received significant critical acclaim when it premiered at the 2024 Venice Film Festival. The film is about a woman at the end of an extraordinary life, reflecting on what has been lost and what endures. The choice of that specific role at that specific moment in her own life was not lost on critics or audiences. She appeared at the premiere alone, elegant and controlled, and gave interviews that touched on grief and loss and the specific kind of resilience that comes from having been through things that left their mark. She did not have to explain the parallel for anyone who was paying attention. What do you think the full truth is about why it took 8 years and what it cost everyone involved? Share your thoughts with us in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.